Shalom Aleichem. A lot has happened since the last time we've been together. So I do want to speak a little bit in Yonah D'Yoyim. Everybody is aware of what's the nigla of what's going on. Yeshivas and shuls open, governor's regulations, adherence, not adherence, litigation, worse than litigation, people misbehaving, giving a bad surah to what a Chumma Yid is, rioting, speaking trust, speaking like a guy, attacking Malchus, like a guy would attack Malchus. All that is the Dvam Hagluyim. But under the Niglois, there's Nestoris. I'll give you a dogma. It was today, I don't say shir on Tuesday, so I was today in a shtetl called Inwood. Inwood is one of the 5 towns. It's not the armster of the 5 towns, the smallest of the 5 towns. A kleine shtetl Inwood. And in Inwood is a shul, the main shul of Inwood. And 6 classes of the Masifta, Chaim Shloima, of Darkei Torah, the 10th and 11th, 3 parallel classes of each, are now located in the Inwood Shul. It's not a red zone. It's in Long Island, it's in Nassau County, and it's a whatever zone. It's probably no zone, because the zones are only New York City and maybe not, maybe the state, but it's Beseder. They're allowed to be there. And it was an amazing experience. Walk in the classrooms, to speak of learning. It's mamish a feeling of Mishnah Le'Zazim and Koima. Disruption, they're not allowed to leave the building, they're in the building, and Malerent, it's mamish with simcha. From my feeling is that we're talking now schwere Tausender, boys, Bacharim, Jingelach, Bacharim, Nederlach, Mädlich in high school, we talk schwere Tausender in a few days have given sich Chanetze without being bombastic, without arguing with the governor, without being a moirid in the governor, without making negative statements, and we did what we had to do. It reminded me of the story in Denmark when Yimach Shemoy wanted the Denmark to ally themselves with him and that the Yidden should be put in ghettos like they were in all the other conquests of the Nazis in Ashman. And the king of Denmark in one night led his whole population to ferry all the Yidden in Denmark, a Nashim Betaf, over the night to Sweden, which was a neutral country and was not involved in Hitler. Yimach Shemoy had no ashpah over that. It's what's really happened. Still a hate to avoid confrontation. But Mishnah Le'Zazim and Koima, that we should come straight out of Simchas Torah into learning. Anoshim, Nashim. The girls' learning is very important. We wouldn't have Kailalim if not for the girls learning. We wouldn't have dairis if not for the girls learning. And Corona, Rahman al-Islam, the Brudny Shalom sent us this shekliche Nisayan, and in the months of the first wave, the fact that children learned at home, the teenagers learned at home, had very modest success. A miyuta wa matzliach. Ruba the Ruba fell. Ruba the Ruba had all the symptoms of a batala mevia. It's Mishnah Ksubis that batala brings bad things. And those children and those that were not really engaged through virtual learning, properly engaged. So they were spending months upon months of batala and batala mevia. And this time all the Menalim and all the Roshei Moizdas realized that it's pikuach nefesh. We can't do this again. We can't have virtual learning for a second time. And mamish, literally, I'm telling you the emes, Mishnah is azim and kaima. Everybody found an eitzah. Whatever eitzah it is, the whole unzerike Welt found a way to do it without having to be moirid and misgora in our government. Learned, weiter lernen, and there won't be a hefsek. So I wanted to say something that this Shabbos I was extremely nesayra to. Cain his history is probably in Chinuch one of the greatest paradoxes, probably one of the greatest, maybe the greatest paradox in history. Cain, loichitas hatoisves and avodah zara, Tavlamet Chesom and Beis, in Sanhedrin, meaning. Shitas HaToisvis in Sanhedrin, Tavlamet Chesom and Beis. He and two twin sisters were the only human beings in history that were born, were conceived and giving birth to in that few-hour window of Adam Lifnei Achet. Adam v'Chava Lifnei Achet was a window of 2 or 3 hours. And in that little window of 2 and 3 hours, on the day of Brias Adam, was v'ya Adam Yoda es Chava Ishtoi Vatar Vateled es Kain. The Gemara says, Shnayim Olu L'mita, and Arba, and Taisa says it wasn't Arba, it was with the twins. There is Shitas Rishonim that Hevel also was born at that time, and there are other Rishonim that Hevel was not born at that time. So you couldn't have a holier conception than the conception of Cain. Adam Shalifnei Achet and Chava Shalifnei Achet was the Adam Yoda as Chava Ishtoi and Vatelet. In that world, Cain was born. Kodesh Kadashim is a mashal to that, because Kodesh Kadashim that we know is Iftachet. That was something what they call Hoid Gedumin, a different world. And yet, first Ritzeach in history is Cain. Such a toilda, such a toilada was the first Ritzeach in history. Provocation, we don't even understand what it was all about. But Chazal elaborate what was this dispute between Cain and Hevel. But the first murderer in history is Cain. Many, many murderers after him. He's the murderer of the state in the Torah, Koil de Mei Achicha Tzoyikim Mino Adam. That's Cain. Wie kann das sein? Steht eine mördige Sache in Medrash Rabbah. The Medrash Rabbah says that you see in the parsha, the Rebbeinu Shalom was lenient with him. He put him in noise, and didn't know whether it starts up at Cain. Why was he lenient with him? Why was David still lenient with him? A murderer. Why was he lenient with him? He was more lenient with him than any murderer that's going to follow in history. Because any murderer that follows in history, in this week's parsha, steht Shofech Dama Adam Dama Yishofech. And Mitamol, there was a murderer that didn't have the law thrown at him, the book thrown at him. Shofech Dama Adam Dama Yishofech. And Rashi the Ramban, we all know, says either in the end of Bereshis or somewhere in Noach, I think it's in the end of Bereshis, the Ramban says that the ganze Welt stammt from Cain, because Cain was Noach Shver. So Machloikas could be. But the Ramban says that the Cain has a zeich, the Yeshu, the Chorn, Tzas LeCain, because the wife of Noach was Cain's daughter, and it's a Geblim the Shver from the ganze Welt. That how much the Rebbeinu Shalom looked out for him, like that sheet. Steht in Medrash Rabbah, Sheloi Haya Mimi Lilmoit. Sheloi Haya Loi Mimi Lilmoit. He didn't have from whom to learn. So one of the Mefarshim, he didn't have who to teach him what's called a lethal blow. Sorry, he didn't go to English. He missed out on English. He didn't chap that a stone kills. He didn't know that a stone kills. And like one of the Midrashim, he killed with a stone. So Pashtush gewusst, facts of life. That's the pshat. But the Matnas Kohuna doesn't say that. The Eitz Yosef says this. Matnas Kohuna says, that nobody taught him not to be a murderer. So in Ksava Kabbalah state that the reason when Cain gave birth to his son, he called him Chanoich. And then he built a city and he called the city Chanoich. So Ksava Kabbalah says he surrounded himself with this tremendous billboard, Chanoich, Chinuch. The poor fellow never had Chinuch. So this was a reminder, you got to do it yourself. Nobody was mechanech you. So Chinuch, be mechanech yourself. You weren't zeichet to Chinuch, be mechanech yourself. A mensch kann sich allein nicht mechanech sein. But what is steht doch da, that Cain and Hevel both obviously were born adults. Because Cain steht doch in Gemara, Shnayim Yordu. But the Medrash Rabbah, you learn the Parsha, you learn the Medrash Rabbah, this whole machlokes, Cain and Hevel, took place the first Hanukkah like one. Cain was somewhere between, Hevel and Cain were between 50 and 70 days old. Well, 50, 70-day-old people don't get into wars, don't kill each other with rocks, don't have kol demei achicha tzoyakim in Adam. Teretz says they were adults at birth, and they were 50, 70 days older, and that was the tkufa of the winter. And in that winter, in that fall of the very first year of creation, but chinuch he never had. He was born an adult. He never had chanoich lanar al pidarko. So here he had the biggest hayrasoi v'leidasoi b'gdusha possible. Any other chases hayrasoi v'leidasoi compared to Cain's hayrasoi v'leidasoi, it's not shayach. It's not even in the same planet. Because Adam lifnei achet and Adam la'achar achet, you look a little bit in the Ramchal and Derech Hashem and other Svarim, you can't handle in one conversation, Adam lifnei achet and Adam la'achar achet. And here is someone that was conceived and given birth to koidem hachet. But he didn't have chinuch. And without chinuch, lo haya lo yimid lilmoid. Vas shekein lo yeyaseh. You could be born b'kedusha. You could have all the ashpahas of kedusha. You could be a derivative of Gan Eden. The Gan Eden of Nor Yoitze Me'eden Lahashkois. But if you didn't have chinuch, you don't have the kelim with which to be aware that murder is not accepted. That's chinuch. Man will sich verstehen. Was geht da vor? What's the statement that Klal Yisrael is making? In Eretz Yisrael, it's the same thing. I'm not one of these people that are going to say shtusim, that the governor or the mayor or any governor or the Israeli governors, they're out to be oike Torah. There's different shtus. There's a medical sakana. They might be callous about Torah. Why shouldn't they be callous about Torah? Even a yid that doesn't appreciate Torah, it's main garnish to say. Oh, but they're not closing down the yeshivas because the Yevonim said, "Kisvulechem al keren ashor elechem chelik b'lekei Yisrael." That's whoever says that is a pesi, and whoever believes that is a pesi yamin l'chol davar. But a sakona gedola against chinuch we are, and the one who orchestrated this sakona gedola against chinuch is Bara Olam, Einoid Mulvadoi, Hu Amavayehi, Hu Tziva Vayamoid. It's him. This corona came with this price. The shuls became inaccessible. Yeshivas became inaccessible. Beis Yaakovs became inaccessible. Kach ola b'machshava lefonov. Kach gozar gzeira from the Borei Olam. But how did we respond? The first time we were shell-shocked. We were living with sirens. We were shell-shocked. First of all, everybody was scared for themselves. And the Levites. And the level of Klal Yisrael, the cut in the leadership of Klal Yisrael, in all segments of the Welt of the Klal Yisrael. Chachamim, Tzadikim, Nevoinim, Anshe Chesed, Shem Yirachem, Atzadik Ovad, Anshe Chesed Nesaf. It was Naira. But this time around, Klal Yisrael, the Am Chacham v'Navoin, understands. What does it mean? You're teaching virtually. You're having children at home and you're going to pipe in Torah to them. How are you going to do that? The Kviyas is the home. Takonis Ben Gam, Takonis Beram, Zachur Oisoyo Ish Latoiv, the Reb Yeshua Ben Gamlo Shmoi, the Kohen Gadol, Reb Yeshua Ben Gamlo in Bayis Sheni, that the Gemara has in Eloyachbar and Baba Basra speaks about him. Beis HaSefer. It's a Beis HaSefer. A yeshiva is a home, away from home. Even for little kinderlach, even for those that are only there from 8:30 in the morning till 5:30 in the afternoon, even the lower kids, the lower grades. And as a child gets older, he spends more of, and she spends more of their waking hours in the confines of the Daled Amis of the Beis HaSefer, of what we call the yeshiva. That's not really a yeshiva. Katana is not a yeshiva. Shiva Katana in the Haman in Eretz Yisrael refers to Mesifta Bacher, what we call Mesifta. But whatever it is, it's a Kviyus. And we were deprived of it for 3 months. And in those 3 months that our children were deprived of it, they were not mechunachim. Because Rabbi Yeshua ben Gamla in his wisdom understood that we have to delegate. We can't do this at home. There's so much going on in our house. And in Corona, there was so much going on in our house where it was an unemployed mother and an unemployed father trying to hold on to life in this house. And their children had to learn. Kleine, mittlere, ältere. We got schreckliche nisyonis. And we had terrible nisyonis. And we had terrible agmas nefesh on many of the children. The damage is still hurting, and the wounds are still bleeding. Klal Yisrael is the Am Chacham v'Navai. Still a hate. I don't even think there was a organized asifa between all the mechanchim and all the menalim. But Klal Yisrael knows what they have to do. So as we speak, alle kinderlich lernen, whether it's in someone's basement, or it's in the backyard, or it's in the Ezras Nashim of a shul, or in a simcha room, or here or there, or in a third place. Yiddische Kinder lernen. In Mishnah Leizazim and Kaima. Because chinuch means that the heiligste yelud in the world, without chinuch, turns into a murderer. Unpashete Yidden, unpashete Toilades, with Chinuch, turn into Mashiach, turn into Amoroyim and Tanoim and Rishonim and Achroinim and everything that we know, all the Gedolim and Tzaddikim of all the ages, were people not born before the Chet of Adam Arishan, born well after the Chet of Adam Arishan. But with Chinuch, look what they became. That's the story that we're sitting on today, Be'ezer Hashem Yisbarach. Poshet Ashreinu. Ashreinu. Ashrei ha'am shekocha loi. Ashrei ha'am she'Hashem elikav. What kind of gaiva for a Yid? What kind of gaiva for a Yid to be part of a Zaklal Yisrael? What are the Goyim worried about? They're worried about bars. They're worried about golf courses, about gyms, about beaches. They're worried about school. Those that have no solution with babysitting are a little worried with school. But the regular school, what do they learn in school? Schools are worse places than what they have at home. What they wouldn't dare do in front of a parent, they'll do in front of a teacher. Do we have to look more than the train station in Avenue M to see what's metut in school? Every day, 3:30, watch what comes out of the train station. Wieder Zetois, on this train and off the train. That in their own homes, they don't get away with that kind of behavior that they do in school. Aber vani, how does David HaMelech say? Kol Malchei Mizrach u'Ma'ariv. They get together by a party. V'zeh and zeyos. Aber v'ani tfilosi l'cha Hashem eis ratzah. But then, it's also a tviyah. Are we utilizing this gift? This most powerful gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us, which is chinuch, which is chanoich lanar al pi darkoi, which although Rabbi Yeshua ben Gamla was mesakin, a partnership between the chinuch habayis and the chinuch habeit sefer. Are we doing our part of the partnership kahogen? Are we taka internalizing what a brekel chinuch means? That on chinuch, there's lehoyolay mimilil mechikein lo ya'aser achman al-Islam. Nicht in Corona, and in our poshetin talk, and in our poshetin Shabbos table. Do we always value in each pa'ula that we do as parents? Do we value the chinuch level of what we're doing? What we are doing and what we're not doing? Do we always, when we do cheshbon hanefesh in our actions, do we take factor in how powerful the chinuch factor of our action is? How meaningful the chinuch factor of our actions are? What's a plus in chinuch? What's a minus in chinuch? We should never forget this tkufa that Klal Yisrael salvaged chinuch in such an heroic way is only a lelamed ala klal kuloi. That we should always be aware and fashtei the oimek and the depth of the Indian called chinuch. And chinuch is not only giving over Torah K'dosh. What does it say? By Rav, his Talmidim Erstim Rabbeinu Tilamdeinu Orchos Chaim. Orchos Chaim L'mayla L'mask. Orach Chaim L'mayla L'mask. With all that goes on in a yeshiva, but acting out regular life, the Rebbe of acting out how a person lives regular life, that Beit Sefer is still the home. Till a boy goes to a dormitory yeshiva, till a girl goes to seminary away from home. The Rebbe on Orchos Chaim, the Rebbe on living life is the home. Who teaches a bacha how to do a Shabbos table? Who teaches a girl how preparation for Shabbos looks? We learn that in school. You can't give it over in school. How could you give it over in school? School, it's words. A picture, no Zoktach de Welt, a picture is worth 1,000 words. The picture of Isnagus, of Midor Dor, is Shma Mini Musar Avicha, the Altito Ishtoira Sinecha. Of the Iker or Ikrim, Kayin, you can't be born in a holier spot and you can't be conceived in a holier way. In Mizmor HaTshuva, Chazal point out, David HaMelech says, Ein ba'avoin choylolti, uvechet yechemasni imi. Because even though his father was Yishai, who was meis be'etya shel Nachash, aber the mama nisht. So the only way he was a chayte, because bechet yechemasni imi. Kayin didn't have that. There was no yechemasni. There was no choylolti. It was kodesh, 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 kodesh. But it's so worthless because without chinuch, lo hoyo lo lilmoy shekein lo yeyosef. Had to share it because I think it's a transformational chazal. Suppose the Eibush to help him. We should go out with Keren Afela. We should all be Zeiche, the Mehera to see Bishuas and Shal Yisrael.